I just wanted to say welcome to everyone. It is 2 o'clock, top of the hour. We're happy to get started. You are here joining us for a press conference with Romanucci and Blandin and DiCello, Levitt, and Gutzler to talk about a new class action lawsuit against ComEd on behalf of consumers and businesses in Illinois. The first speaker today will be Stephen Blandin from Romanucci and Blandin, followed by Adam Levitt from DiCello, Levitt, and Gutzler. And then we will open up for Q&A at the end. And I do just in full transparency want to let each of you know that plaintiffs in this case will not be taking part in media activity today. So I want to spare you the time of trying to chase 6 interviews or photos. This will be attorneys only at this point in the case. So with that, let's get started. Let me turn it over to Stephen Blandin.
Thank you, Jen. Folks, thanks for being here. Romanucci and Blandin joined forces with DiCello, Levitt to bring this class action lawsuit against Commonwealth Edison. As you folks know, last week Commonwealth Edison admitted to massive fraud and bribery against the ratepayers of the state of Illinois. DiCello, Levitt, and Romanucci and Blandin have brought this class action in an attempt to have a clawback of the hundreds of millions and perhaps billions of dollars that Commonwealth Edison has admitted that they have received in response to bribing state officials. In this particular case, in the deferred plea agreement, we see that Commonwealth Edison has acknowledged that they have received over $150 million in benefit as a result of this bribery scheme. This lawsuit is to determine the full extent, because we all know that Commonwealth Edison did not admit to $150 million, that this goes much deeper than that. And we're going to have a full accounting from Commonwealth Edison to determine how extensive the fraud was, so that the 4 million ratepayers in the state of Illinois will get their money back as a result of this bribery scheme that took place. Now, a class action lawsuit is brought on behalf of certain individual representatives of the class, but it's for the benefit of the entire class, all 4 million members in the state of Illinois. And Adam Levitt is going to talk to you a little bit about the class action specifically itself and the components of that. Adam?
Sure. Okay, thank you, Stephen. And thanks to all of you for coming online today. I'd say live, but we're on Zoom. And I think that the important thing also, before I get into the nuts and bolts of the class action litigation, is that here, even though ComEd has already paid a $200 million fine, I think it's important to keep in mind that not a penny of that is going to the ComEd ratepayers. That money is simply a fine that will ultimately be remitted to the U.S. government. So the purpose of our lawsuit is to work toward seeking full and complete justice for ComEd's ratepayers to be made whole for what we believe will be shown as improper inflation of rates. Now, the purpose of a class action, as a lot of you know, a class action is a representative lawsuit. As Stephen said, we have 3 individuals and 3 Illinois businesses, who each of whom has been overpaying, as we allege in our complaint, each month, each time they got a ComEd bill for the better part of the last almost decade, since 2011, as we allege in our complaint. What will happen at a certain point in our case, as happens in every class action case, we will ask our judge to certify or approve our case as a class action case. That means that we're going to argue that the case will ultimately satisfy the requirements of Illinois law that will let us bring it forward all the way through trial as a single case on behalf of everybody who was hurt in the same way by ComEd's wrongful conduct. So we look forward to doing that because we believe, as we've all seen from the statements in the deferred prosecution agreement and the allegations that we set forth in our complaint, that a whole lot of really serious wrongdoing happened here. And our goal is to help our clients and the 4+ million Illinois ratepayers, both individuals and businesses, to get those funds back.
Thank you, Adam. What I'd like to do now. Sure, go ahead.
If I can, I'd like to add one more piece to this.
Please.
Commonwealth Edison, through its very, very active and large PR machine, has already begun to spin this. They've already begun to deny the elements that are contained in the deferred prosecution agreement. Yesterday, I saw for the first time that Commonwealth Edison and Exelon are claiming that there was no benefit that they derived from their bribery. Well, that directly contradicts what's contained on page 6 of the deferred prosecution agreement, where they've admitted that they received in excess of $150 million in benefits. And Adam and I seek to find out exactly how much that it was so that we can return it to the ratepayers of the state of Illinois.
Thank you, Stefan. What I'd like to do now is open us up for Q&A. And you'll see on your Zoom panel, there should be an opportunity for you to enter a question. And I'll be keeping an eye on that queue, and we'll call you by name for you to ask your question. And when it is your turn, I would just ask you give our fantastic tech guy, Christopher, just a second or two pause to activate your mic. So while you're doing that and while you're loading questions in, let me ask one that I would expect is on many of your minds, and that's how much might this mean for the individual consumer or business? Is there a dollar amount that people might expect in a check? Is it that simple or not?
Sure, and I can answer that if you'd like. It should be as simple as that. Unfortunately, it's not. And in fact, actually, it would be entirely irresponsible of either one of us to give an actual number at this point in time. Both Stefan and I have been doing this in these kinds of large-scale, important cases for the better part of 30+ years. And I can tell you what will happen here at a certain point in this case, in the discovery process in this case, we will seek and get information from ComEd and Exelon that will help us explain and analyze exactly what the percentage overcharge is. And at that point, once we understand what the percentage overcharge is, we, working with our expert economists, will be able to put together a damages model that explains on a percentage basis and perhaps on an actual basis what each of the class members actually lost and what the measure of class-wide damages is in the aggregate as well as in an allocation process. But that's going to take time in the context of this case going forward.
Thank you, Adam. Okay, thanks. We've got some questions coming in. I'd like to first begin with Carol Marine from NBC5.
Thanks very much. I appreciate that. Can you hear me? I'm not sure you can. Oh,
Perfect.
good. So this agreement basically says that ComEd promises not to disparage the agreement in any way or suggest that there's any error in it by saying, in fact, that there was no benefit yesterday. Have they already broken the agreement with the government?
Yes, they have, Carol. This is Stefan Blandin. There's absolutely no question that Commonwealth Edison has a systematic problem with telling the truth. We've seen it repeatedly in a number of different matters over time. When it's in their benefit to cut a deal with the federal government, they will cut the deal. When they're asked to be held accountable to the ratepayers, then they will go back on that agreement. And what's bizarre is they're subjecting themselves to perjury charges here. So the leadership of Commonwealth Edison is not doing the ratepayers of the state of Illinois any favor or their shareholders any favor by attempting to deny what they've already admitted to under penalties of perjury.
Is there an immediate remedy for that?
That's up to the U.S. Attorney's Office. The U.S. Attorney's Office has full authority to elect to disregard the terms of the plea agreement and to prosecute under the full penalties of criminal law. And if you'll note, one of the provisions of the agreement provided that based on the benefit that Commonwealth Edison received, they could have been fined by the federal government up to $480 million. So Commonwealth Edison is playing with fire.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Next, we have a question from Peter Hancock of Capital News Service. Peter, can you hear us? I'm having trouble.
Can you hear me now?
We got you live. Go.
Okay.
I'll go.
Bribery and fraud are two different crimes. The revenues that ComEd received in the form of customer bills came pursuant to duly enacted laws. The laws may have been enacted as a result of criminal actions. I'm just wondering, where do you establish the elements of fraud in the revenues that they collected?
Go ahead, Adam.
Now, in terms of where we are, in terms of the fraud, as we allege in our complaint, the scheme itself enabled ComEd to charge higher rates and get higher rates put into law. So the claims that we allege, which arise out of the Illinois Consumer Fraud Act and unjust enrichment, all sound in the fact that there were, in our view, hundreds of millions of dollars going into ComEd's pocket as a result of the scheme. So while in fact, our case and our claims, they don't sound in bribery. They sound in consumer fraud and unjust enrichment.
Okay, and then my second question is, if there is a judgment and award in the plaintiff's favor, what percentage of that goes to the lawyers?
Well, in any class action case, what's interesting, and a lot of people have a misunderstanding about this, is that we don't get paid unless and until the judge overseeing the entire case says what we get paid. It's not as though we can say, this is what we want, this is what we get. We have to put in a fee application or a motion for fees at the end of any case, asking the court to both review and approve our fees. So at the end of this case, assuming a successful outcome, we will seek our fees and expenses from the court in the form of a motion. But that's going to be all the way at the end of the case. Until then, we are, in effect, venturing this case with all of the other Illinois ratepayers, advancing our time, advancing our expenses, because we think this is a worthy cause. We think this is a serious case. And it's something that if lawyers like Stefan and I were unwilling or unable to do, the average ratepayer isn't going to be heading out hiring a lawyer on an hourly basis, arguably, and seeking to hold Commonwealth Edison accountable in any way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Okay, this is going to be last call for questions. I'm not seeing any in the queue, but let me give you a second and ask one more just to make sure we capture any questions from the journalists on the line. My question is, perhaps we can expand a bit on timing. What do we expect in terms of any response from the court and next steps? Stefan, you want to take that one?
Well, the lawsuit was filed yesterday. We are waiting for assignment to an individual judge in the Chancery Division of State Court. After that happens, then Commonwealth Edison will have an opportunity to respond to the allegations, and discovery in the lawsuit will begin. Let me just add one thing here, Jen, to Peter's first question. One of the things to keep in mind is that Commonwealth Edison and Exelon have been given a state-authorized monopoly in the state. They provide 70% of Illinois' population with electricity in exchange for a guaranteed profit. In this particular case, one of the things that we're going to be delving into are the 2 nuclear power plants that were underperforming, that ratepayers bailed out as a result of this legislation that was influenced by the admitted bribery. Significantly, you have 2 failing nuclear power plants in the state of Illinois for a company that is a for-profit company that makes a profit that is worth billions of dollars. Why are the ratepayers bailing it out? And that's one of the things that we're going to be looking into in our litigation.
Thank you. We do have an additional question from Amanda Vanicki with WTTW.
Hey there. So a couple of questions. For starters, in this, I think dovetails with Peter's question some. Can you explain, do you allege that the expenses that ComEd spent on, for example, the smart grid, should those be reimbursed, or is it merely you're looking for ratepayers to get back the profit?
Right. So, Amanda, if you take a look at the deferred prosecution agreement, Edison has admitted that they've derived profits in excess of $150 million as a result of the bribery that took place. And it's an elaborate scheme. It's a number of different pieces of legislation that were passed. And if you look at the profits, the profitability of Commonwealth Edison over the last decade, it is shot through the roof. Also of significance, the idea that Commonwealth Edison was somehow held to account by a $200 million fine, that's simply nonsense. The same day that the U.S. Attorney's Office announced the deferred prosecution agreement and the $200 million fine, Exelon, the parent company, their stock increased. It went up. The reason being, everybody in the market believed that Commonwealth Edison and Exelon got off with a slap on the wrist. So we're here to find out what the full extent of their profits were as a result of this admitted bribery scheme, and to make sure that that gets refunded to the ratepayers.
And then also enter this deal with the feds, in part because perhaps, as you allege, they got off easy, but also because then they wouldn't have to drag their dirty laundry through the courts. Do you have any statement that you can share with us in terms of what you would be willing to put under seal? I know this is kind of a lot of ifs, but we're clearly interested in what all this comes to show. Do you have any statement in terms of that, if ComEd would want any of this to be kept in the dark?
Well, as happens in every case, a defendant wants to keep as many things in the dark as possible. And there's always an ongoing fight in any case where a defendant wants a really comprehensive confidentiality order. And our view is that if you're not doing anything wrong, what do you want to keep it secret for, other than something that I characterize as competitively sensitive information? So here, I do agree with you that there will likely be a fight or a push by ComEd and Exelon to try to keep everything in the dark. And it's our job to do whatever we can to keep as much of that as public as possible.
How ironic is that, Adam? Commonwealth Edison wants to keep things in the dark.
Well, yeah.
Thanks for giving me a laugh. And then a final question, is there anything more that you can share in terms of where you found the plaintiffs, either the individuals or the businesses, for this case? I know that we've said that they won't be available to us, but anything more that you can share in terms of, did they come to you? Did you seek them down, etc.?
There are over 4 million plaintiffs that potentially a class would represent. Finding people that have paid and have been ripped off by Commonwealth Edison having them upset by the plea agreement that was entered into and wanting their money back. There's a long line of people.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. We do have a question from Dave McKinney at WBEZ. All right, Dave, let's see if your mic's working now. Okay, no luck, but I will read Dave's question. Oh, we got him? Okay, let me go ahead and ask. Dave's question is, do you anticipate needing to depose House Speaker Mike Madigan in the matter, and what might you seek to learn?
You want to answer that, Stefan?
Yeah, I think the short answer is, in this case, the focus is on Commonwealth Edison. They've already admitted to the bribery. So the issue here is no longer did they do it. The only question is, what is the full amount that they've ripped off the ratepayers? So that's where the focus is going to be.
Okay, that looks like it wraps us up in terms of questions. Adam, anything in a closing statement category from you?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Once again, I wanted to thank all of you for coming out this afternoon. As we said at the outset, Stefan and I think this is a really important case for, I think, almost everyone on this call, whether it's us or you. We are all ComEd ratepayers. And it's unfortunate that, as we allege in our complaint, and as ComEd has now recently admitted, that operating a business using bribery as a business model is a bad idea. We think ultimately an Illinois judge and a jury, if we take it all the way through trial, will ultimately see that, in fact, a company cannot operate like this, especially a company like Commonwealth Edison, where, as Stefan said earlier, has a legalized monopoly. So they, even more than other companies, have a public trust, and they have to understand, or be repeatedly shown and made to understand, that it is a privilege to actually be doing business in Illinois and taking money from Illinois citizens and businesses and ratepayers in general. They seem to have completely forgotten that, and to the tune of hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that they've improperly taken from our class members, as we allege in the complaint. So we look forward to pursuing and prosecuting this case in the Circuit Court of Cook County. And of course, if any class members have any questions about any of this, both Stefan and I are really easy to find and reach, and we'd be happy to speak with any of you.
Thank you, Adam. I did just get another note from Dave McKinney. His mic is not working properly, so he had a follow-up question that I will ask, and maybe Stefan, you can take it and then roll right into your closing remarks. Dave's second question is, do you anticipate details to your case being obscured by the ongoing federal investigation?
So that's up to the U.S. Attorney's Office in terms of what they decide to do, whether they believe that Commonwealth Edison is already in violation of the terms of their agreement and they have to go back and prosecute them further. But I want to point out, tomorrow is an important day. Tomorrow we have hearings before the Illinois Commerce Commission, where the commission has requested that Commonwealth Edison appear before them and explain what actions they've taken to assure that this doesn't happen again. And it will be quite interesting to see if this is a rubber stamp and a further cover-up, or if there are, in fact, meaningful questions and meaningful answers given by Commonwealth Edison. I suspect that what you're going to see is a continual denial and attempt to walk away from what they've admitted to in the deferred prosecution agreement. So I'm very interested to see how strong the Illinois Commerce Commission is tomorrow in requesting that Commonwealth Edison come clean and divulge how much they've actually profited as a result of this bribery. Will the commission require that they produce those documents, or will they duck it and keep this in the dark?
Thanks, Stefan. And we just get another question or two trickling in here at the end. Peter Hancock, to your question, this is filed in the Circuit Court of Cook County Chancery Division. Okay. And I think that clears us out in our Q&A tab here, folks. So thank you. Certainly to any of the reporters, you are free to reach out to me at jmcguffin@rvlaw.net or give me a call. The emails have all my contact information in there. Sit tight, folks. I've got one more question. One more from Dave McKinney. The question is, do you expect to depose Ann Pragamore, Mike McLean, Jay Doherty, or any of the former ComEd executive or lobbyists?
I suspect that we will be deposing all of the Commonwealth Edison and Exelon decision makers all the way up to the top.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time. Certainly here to help as you continue your coverage, and wishing everybody a nice afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.